An old man, silver hair, handcuffed hands. He walked into the courtroom under the cold gaze of everyone present. The charge? Disturbing the peace. For sleeping beside the cafe's exhaust vent, just to keep from freezing to death. No one knew. He was a veteran, a soldier who once fought for this country. No one asked, what has this man lived through? They only saw a homeless vagrant and thought, just another burden on society. But when the judge read his name, she froze. Her hand trembled. Eyes widened. Henry Callahan? That name was the first chapter of a story America had forgotten. This isn't just a trial. This is a reminder. One of thousands of veteran stories we've never fully heard. And if you believe that justice for veterans should never be negotiable, stay with us, because this is Justice for Veterans. Before he was a defendant, Henry Callahan was just a shadow drifting through the city. He slept under bridges, ate discarded bread from the sandwich shop dumpster. Each morning, he sat curled up in a park corner, clutching a worn-out backpack like it held all that remained of his life. Inside, a faded family photo, a military ID, and a yellowed, neatly folded letter. Passersby moved past him like he was a lamppost. Some pinched their noses, others hurled insults. No one knew he once wore a uniform. No one asked why a soldier had ended up like this. Only Henry Ash Knight, looking up at the freezing sky, would whisper to the past, I'm still alive, but does anyone remember me? A winter night, bone-chilling. Henry huddled beside a small cafe where the kitchen vent blew out the last warm air in a city that had gone to sleep. He didn't beg, didn't speak. He just wanted to survive one more night. A staffer stepped out, frowned, called security. Didn't take long, police lights swept across the storefront. Get up, you're not allowed here. Henry stood without resistance, quietly said, I just needed some warmth. Cold steel bit into his weathered wrists. No one asked where he came from. No one cared who he was, only that he sat in the wrong place, on a night too cold to still feel human. The next morning, Henry was brought to court, clothes crumpled, hair disheveled, shoes torn wide enough to expose his toes. He sat among other defendants, but he wasn't like them. He had no lawyer, no one by his side, no one waiting in the hallway. The prosecutor glanced at him, scribbled briefly. The clerk typed without even looking up, whispers in the crowd. Another filthy old bum, huh? Henry didn't look at them. He just held his backpack close as if protecting the last piece of himself. Then, the main door opened. The judge entered, holding a case file. She flipped to the first page, read aloud. Defendant, Henry Callahan. She paused. 1 second. 2. Utter silence. And the world began to shift. Judge Margaret Ellison, one of the toughest in the district, known not for coldness, but for absolute fairness. She tried major cases, faced hardened criminals, but never had her hands shaken while holding a file. Until today. Henry Callahan. That name echoed in her mind like a ghost from the past. She set the file down, her eyes no longer on the page but staring through time itself. Fallujah, Iraq, 2004. Her brother, Lieutenant David Ellison, led a Marine squad. Ambushed. Almost no survivors. Only one man had charged through gunfire to pull David from the wreckage. His name was Henry Callahan. She had spent 2 decades searching for him. Letters, calls, old comrades. And now he stood before her, in cuffs, labeled a public nuisance. Margaret whispered just loud enough for herself. It can't be you. In Judge Margaret's mind, the courtroom faded away. She was back in the dusty red fields of Fallujah, the roar of helicopters, the sharp crack of gunfire, and one final scream from a military radio. We're surrounded. Casualties confirmed. Requesting backup. Lieutenant David Ellison, her brother, commanded that squad. The attack killed many American soldiers on the spot. David was badly injured, trapped beneath a collapsed house. Everyone thought he was dead, until one man returned to the battlefield. No orders, No backup. Just him. Alone under enemy fire. He dragged David from the rubble, his back hit by bullets, his arms soaked in blood. The name in that military report, Henry Callahan. Margaret's hands tightened around the case file, her breath shaky. She looked at the man standing before her thin, worn, hollow-eyed, but that look in his eyes was the same as in the photo David once mailed home from war. Margaret laid the file on the bench, hands clasped. She stared at Henry Callahan for a long time, as if brushing away time's dust from his face. The room grew unnervingly silent. No coughs, no shifting seats. She nodded slightly, then said, "Court is adjourned. I need to verify the defendant's information." Henry stood motionless. No reaction, no raised chin, no slouched shoulders. Only his eyes lowered gently, weary, as if he'd waited for this moment forever, but no longer had the strength to hope. Margaret walked quickly to her chambers, unlocked the drawer. Inside, a bundle of old letters, tied with string. The last one from Davidson, from Iraq, in 2004, had one single sentence. "Callahan saved your brother's life. If you ever find him, tell him I still owe him everything." And now, that debt stood just outside her door, in handcuffs, labeled homeless. As the court prepared to reconvene, murmurs buzzed quietly. The name Callahan hung heavy in the air. Henry sat silently in the back, still cuffed. Suddenly, the courtroom door opened. A middle-aged man stepped in, black suit, gray tie, stern yet steady face. He didn't glance around, just walked straight to the podium. "I'm Michael Grant, federal attorney. I will be representing Mr. Callahan, entirely pro bono." A few gasps rose from the gallery. The prosecutor moved to object, but the judge raised her hand. Margaret looked at Michael, surprised, relieved. They were old colleagues, and she knew. Michael never showed up. Unnecessarily. Henry said nothing. Just once he turned to look at Michael, and in that moment, both men nodded subtly. No one knew. Michael Grant once held an old military case file, and he was the first to believe that Henry Callahan wasn't just a homeless man, but a forgotten hero. Judge Margaret looked to Michael Grant, gently asking, "Do you have proof?" Michael opened his briefcase, pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a photo squad of dusty Marines standing amid the rubble of Iraq. In the center, a man, his left shoulder bandaged, blood soaking through his uniform. That man was Henry Callahan. Michael held up a copy of a military dispatch. "Marine risks life to save Lieutenant David Ellison under enemy fire. Identity of soldier remains unknown." Then he took out one final item. A letter, yellowed paper, handwritten lines. Michael's voice trembled slightly. "This is a letter from Lieutenant Ellison, sent to his sister Judge Margaret from Fallujah, 2004. He handed it to her. She froze. Her eyes scanned each word slowly. Her fingers clenched the page's edge. Then she read aloud, quietly. "If you ever meet Callahan, the man who saved my life, hug him for me." The courtroom went still. Henry raised his head for the first time. No one saw a vagrant anymore. They saw a soldier returned from the forgotten corners of history. The courtroom was frozen in silence. Only rustling papers could be heard, and eyes fixed on a man once scorned, now holding a medal in hand. Suddenly a chair scraped back. From the back row, an elderly man stood, tall, sturdy, despite his silver hair. He removed his glasses, spoke clearly. "Permission to testify. My name is Edward Briggs, former Marine, Bravo Squad, Fallujah. Back then, we were trapped in a collapsed house. Fire all around, chaos everywhere. No one thought we'd make it. Then he came back. Alone. Through the gunfire. He pulled each of us out of that hell. I'm alive because of him." Edward pulled from his pocket a small, rusted piece of metal, a broken dog tag. He held it high, aimed straight at Henry. "I've kept this hat for 20 years, waiting for the day I could return it to its rightful owner." Henry's trembling hands reached out. A tear slipped down his cheek, falling onto the old tag heavy with the weight of forgotten memory. Judge Margaret gently tapped the gavel. Court is in recess for 30 minutes. No one objected. No one left their seat. It was as if everyone wanted to see what would happen next. She quickly returned to her chambers, locked the door, picked up the phone, dialed the Department of Veterans Affairs. I need a service verification for Henry Callahan. Military ID, 180 924 FJ. No, this isn't about a benefits claim. It's about restoring honor. There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end shifted. Callahan? Fallujah veteran? Please hold. I'm transferring you to the Medal Division. Margaret hung up. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were firm. In the holding room, Henry sat alone, hands limp, eyes vacant, staring at the floor. Beside him, lawyer Michael gently rested a hand on his shoulder. Henry, it's time you received what should have been yours long ago. And just then, a military SUV pulled up outside the courthouse. 3 men in full formal uniform stepped out, in their hands, a polished wooden box. Inside lay something few soldiers ever touched, the Navy Cross. The court reconvened. Everyone returned to their seats, but the room was no longer restless. No one looked at Henry Callahan as a drifter. They looked at him as if a hidden truth had finally emerged. Judge Margaret took her seat. She didn't glance at any files, didn't look at the defendant. She simply said, "Before we continue, I have a guest." The courtroom's back doors opened. 3 uniformed soldiers walked in. Perfect posture, combat insignia on their sleeves. In their hands, a dark mahogany box engraved with the emblem of the United States Navy. The room held its breath. The central officer, a lieutenant colonel, stepped forward, standing before Henry. He opened the box, lifted its contents. Henry Callahan, for extraordinary bravery, risking your life to save comrades in the battlefield of Fallujah. The United States government, on behalf of the Navy, hereby awards you the Navy Cross. Applause. Then silence. Then, everyone rose to their feet. The prosecutor, the court reporter, the spectators. All of them. The guard removed Henry's handcuffs. He stood, hands trembling as he accepted the medal. His eyes welled with tears, not for glory, but because someone finally remembered he had lived and had given. Henry Callahan stood, holding the Navy Cross to his chest, a shining medal. But the real light was in the eyes of those watching him. No more pity, no more whispers, only silence filled with reverence. No words were spoken. And then, a soldier snapped to attention. Another raised a salute. The prosecutor set down her pen. The court clerk rose. The bailiff stood upright, saluting with military precision, and the Neveron rose. No command, no cue. A man once labeled a burden on society was now receiving the highest respect a soldier can earn, the silent honor of his people. Judge Margaret Ellison wiped her eyes gently, her voice steady, low. The court hereby dismisses all charges. And let me remind you of an unwritten law. No Marine is ever left behind. Henry didn't speak. He simply nodded. He had never needed many words. Only one thing, to be remembered. 2 weeks later, Henry Callahan moved into a small apartment dedicated to veterans in the heart of the city. It wasn't large, just a single bed, a bookshelf, a small desk by the window. But to him it was a whole new world. On the wall, he hung the Navy Cross. Next to it, the faded photo David Ellison, the soldier he'd saved 20 years ago. Beside that, a new frame, a picture from the medal ceremony. Henry standing tall, hands saluting, sunlight streaming through the courtroom glass onto his wrinkled, proud face. He brewed tea, turned on the radio. For the first time in years, he didn't have to curl up in the cold night wind. A gentle knock at the door. Judge Margaret Ellison stepped inside, holding a bundle of aged papers tied with string. She handed them to him. "These are my brother's letters. David wrote them before he died. He wanted you to have them." Henry opened them one by one, reading silently. His hands trembled, but not from cold, only from the warmth of memory returning like a gentle breeze. He looked up. Margaret said nothing. She simply sat beside him. 2 people, 2 generations, bound by one thing, gratitude. Henry Callahan was once a forgotten name, No one asked who he had been. No one remembered whom he'd saved, because he no longer fit the image society wanted. But heroes don't die. They just fall silent. At Justice for Veterans, we don't believe a soldier's worth ends when they leave the battlefield. We believe every veteran deserves to live with full dignity, memory, and respect. If a country can send its best to war, it should have enough heart to bring them home. If you've ever seen a Henry Callahan in real life donned, look away, ask their name, listen, share this story, and join us in bringing justice to those who defended your freedom. Justice for Veterans, where no soldier is ever forgotten.